Hey y'all, welcome to another video from WreckingOut.com. So today I'm going to walk you through how I make my own arrows. There's a lot of ways to do this. A lot of folks are particular about the glues they use. I'm not a competitive shooter. I only hunt with my bow. So this is what's worked for me in the past. I hope it helps somebody else who's trying to get into arrow making. And I picked up all the materials for making the arrows, like the saw and the squaring tool, etc., on Craigslist or on Amazon. So I've been doing this for a while just because, again, it was cheaper for me to make my own arrows. So the first thing you're going to do, this is a common style of saw. I'm going to set the depth that it cuts. So my goal is to adjust it so it's only cutting one wall of the arrow. The reason you do this is you don't want to cut quickly through the arrow like you were using a chop saw. If you do that, you have a tendency for the blade to drift and to not get a square cut, which means you have more work to clean up when it comes time to squaring the arrow so you can put the insert in. So I'm pulling the guard out so you only see the blade on one wall of the arrow, and then you will spin the shaft as you're doing the cutting. So once you get the guard in place, there's an Allen screw. Just set it tightly. Be careful not to knock it off, and then be sure to put the guard back on, and you should be good to go as far as the depth that you're going to cut. The other thing I did at the beginning of this was I set the stop so the arrow shaft was just touching the blade, and that allowed me to make that adjustment while looking from the side to make sure I was only cutting through that one wall. So now that you have the depth set for cutting, you want to adjust the stop again. I just use one of my existing arrows as a template. I keep the knock on, and then I adjust the stop until the blade meets where the insert and the shaft are, because you want to cut it at the same length, and then reset your stop tightly. So now that you have the depth and the length set for your arrow, you can start cutting. In this case, I'm using pre-fletched arrows. I'm going to do a video later on fletching your own arrows. But if you're using bare shaft, you can do the same thing. I just leave the nocks in and put it into the stop tightly. And what you want to do is turn the arrow as you're cutting slowly towards the blade, and then take an extra revolution. That way you can clean up any burrs on the arrow. Once you've done that, you're going to use a squaring tool. This is a G5 squaring tool. This is the one I use. Take a silver Sharpie or a color that contrasts with the shaft of your arrow and color the edge of the arrow, because this is going to be what we attempt to grind away to make sure it's even. So again, the point of the squaring tool is to even up the cut so the insert will fit in there easily. So I put the shaft into the squaring tool, and then I just start rolling it in one direction and then checking. So you see that some of the silver has come off. That means that we ground away some of the high edges. We need to grind it until the silver is completely gone, and that means we have a square shaft. Once the shaft is square, you just want to clean up the carbon. So there's carbon inside the arrow from when we cut it and from the grinding we're doing to square the shaft. I use alcohol and peel away some of the cotton on a cotton swab, and then I just run this through the shaft, and then I'll do the same thing with the dry cotton swab. The goal here is to get rid of the carbon so the glue will adhere better. This is probably a good time to mention also that carbon is not good for you at all. So if you're cutting indoors or in the garage, you need to use a respirator. I'm just cutting this outdoors in the back of my truck. So for gluing these inserts, I'm going to use hot glue. I'm going to put it in a low temp hot glue gun, which this is a dual temp gun, so it'll go to low temp. And then you're going to pull the knock, because as you push the insert in, you don't want to create a piston because there's air pressure on the back of the arrow that pushes out the insert. And I'm going to use glue right out of the gun, just like this. This will be controversial for some folks, but it's worked really well for me, and it's quick. So once you get the glue on there, it's low temp, so you have to quickly push it down. And then I'll take some water and I'll swirl it around in the water just to let that glue cure. And then it allows me to take the end and just roll it off, and you have a really clean glue. I don't have many issues with these coming out. Once you get it on there, you can put the outsert on these arrows. These are blood sport arrows, and then put a broadhead on so you can spin the arrow and see if you actually got that shaft square. This is one reason I do like the hot melt, because it's easier for me to remove anything if I ever had to. If you glue it in with super glue, which I do use sometimes, the blue bottle or the blue cap from Gorilla Glue, it is much more difficult to get the insert out. So as you see, I'm spinning this. You're just looking for the tip to stay ideally on one point versus spinning in a circle. So now I'll take these out and I'll shoot them a few times. This is how I make my arrows. It's been really useful for me. It saved me a lot of money as well, and hope it helps someone else who's trying to get into arrow building.